Hello and welcome to this webinar outlining the Lancashire and South Cumbria Self-Harm Education Practice Guide. My name is Dr. Richard Slinger and I'm a clinical psychologist with many years' experience working in children's mental health services and working with education staff to improve their support of students' mental health. This session is designed specifically for education staff, and it recognises that you're often the first trusted adult that a young person will turn to when they're struggling, and you might be the first person to know about their use of self-harm. The purpose of today is to help you feel more confident in understanding self-harm, responding safely and appropriately to student self-harm, and using the self-harm practice guide and pathway to support your decisions. A key message to hold on to throughout this is that you don't need to be a mental health expert to make a difference. The most important and effective responses when children are struggling are when we are calm, compassionate and consistent. In education settings, you see young people every day, often more consistently than any other professional. And that puts you in a unique position to notice changes, build trusting relationships and respond early. For many young people, school or college is the safest place to disclose how they're really feeling. And your response in that moment can shape what happens next. A calm, listening, non-judgmental response can reduce distress, build trust, and increase the likelihood they will seek further help. However, a panicked or critical or reactive response might shut that conversation down. So, how we respond really matters. Self-harm is best understood as a coping strategy, a way of managing overwhelming emotions when someone feels they don't have other options. It can help a young person in a number of ways, such as helping them to release intense emotional pressure, distract from emotional pain by experiencing physical pain, communicate distress to others, feel a sense of control, or feel something when they feel numb. We might think of self-harm as just being cutting or scratching the skin, but it can take many forms, including burning or picking the skin, risk-taking behaviours, substance misuse, disordered eating or self-neglect. It's important to remember that self-harm is not always linked to suicidal thoughts or intent. Self-harm is often a way for people to manage and cope with very difficult feelings, and is very much about wanting to stay alive despite these struggles. In contrast, thoughts of suicide revolve around not wanting to be here anymore. But risk can change, so we always need to remain curious about safety and people's intentions and make sure we get the best support for people when it's needed. Self-harm is often hidden and private, meaning what we see is only part of the picture sometimes. And a key thing to remember is that self-harm is not simply attention seeking or something that will necessarily go away on its own if left alone. It's a sign that a young person needs support. So what might we notice? Because self-harm is often hidden, we might have to rely on noticing changes that happen over time. Some common indicators that you might notice in education settings could include withdrawal or isolating themselves, changes in mood or behaviour from what we expect or what we've seen before, wearing long sleeves or avoiding PE, changes in attendance or changes in their attainment or academic progress, signs of distress or anxiety or irritability, unexplained injuries or frequent first aid needs. You may also notice changes in other ways, such as in their friendships, sleeping patterns, or what they are eating or how much, or increased risk-taking behaviour. There's no single sign that confirms self-harm, and your job is not to diagnose it or diagnose any other mental health condition. Instead, it's about noticing risk and vulnerability, being aware of your own or other people's concerns, and using your own professional curiosity. This might involve us asking ourselves questions such as, What has changed in terms of what we're seeing? What might be behind this? And who else might know or might be supporting this young person? When a young person discloses self-harm, our response is crucial. Some useful things to try to do in the moment can include us staying calm and staying present, finding a quiet place if you can to talk to them and minimise other distractions, listen to them without judgment, use open questions, and thank them for telling you what has been happening, and being honest about the next steps and what you might do or what you might have to do. After any initial conversation about self-harm, it's important to consult and follow your setting's safeguarding procedures. There are some helpful things you could say at that time to support and reassure the student, such as, "You've done the right thing by telling me," and "I'm glad you shared this, and I want to help keep you safe." Try to be honest and transparent in how you are feeling and what you intend to do. So if you're very worried about them, tell them. It can help make any actions you need to take make more sense to them. Although what you might do after the conversation might change, depending on seeking advice from others, try to let the young person know what you intend to do. And try to keep them informed about who you want to talk to or who you hope they could get some support from. You're much more likely to help keep them safe if you are seen as a reliable, trusted person. And if you can be seen as safe, the young person is more likely to be honest with you about any risky behaviours and come back to talk to you again, which is then even more likely to help keep them safe. Although the young person might tell you some very worrying information, if possible, try to avoid panicking or making snap decisions in the moment. If they're not in immediate danger, it's okay to say that you want to have a think about what to do next. You don't need to ask for graphic details of what they've done, as this could be upsetting for both of you and might make it less likely that they'll talk to you again. On the other hand, recognise that they've chosen to talk to you for a reason. So minimising the behaviour or not taking them seriously doesn't help keep them safe and could lead to things escalating. Try not to manage the situation on your own. Recognise that you can't promise complete confidentiality. You should explain you might need to share information in order to keep them safe, and if you can, say who you'll tell and why. If you want to have a look at some more information about how to have these types of conversations, there's a helpful guide from Papyrus which we will give you a link to. And remember that although you're not completing a clinical risk assessment, you are checking for safety. So as a minimum, try to ask about how they're feeling right now, whether they are safe at the moment, whether they have any injuries that need medical treatment, and very importantly, ask whether they've had any thoughts of suicide. Looking after ourselves in this process is important too. Having these conversations can be upsetting and anxiety-provoking for us. So try to check in with another member of staff, and if it helps, offload how you're feeling. Or if you have some formal supervision arrangements, use them. Hearing about risk and self-harm can be upsetting and worrying for us, so try not to hold all of that alone. To help make sense of the kind of support a student might need, the practice guide refers to the Thrive framework. If you haven't come across Thrive before, it's a way to look at a young person's needs and preferences right now in the moment. And it's helpful to use because it gives everyone, education staff, health services and social care, a shared language to use. It means we can talk to a student and figure out if they just need some brief advice, some targeted help, or immediate crisis support, ensuring they don't get passed between services or lost in a complex system. The practice guide provides two distinct versions of this pathway, one for Lancashire and one for Cumbria, but both use the same Thrive elements to help you decide what support is needed based on what you're seeing. The elements of the Thrive pathway are self-care, and this refers to early signs of distress and focus on listening, forming relationships and offering everyday support. Getting advice, which involves emerging concerns where you might seek support from colleagues such as your safeguarding lead or mental health staff. Getting help, and this relates to more consistent or visible self-harm that's impacting daily life, and so might lead to actions such as involving the safeguarding lead, parents and carers, and external support. Getting more help, which applies when there's increased severity, suicidal thoughts, or a significant deterioration where specialist support and multi-agency involvement is needed. And finally, risk support or crisis support, which refers to immediate danger to life, where urgent medical support and emergency services are required. Remember, you're not expected to manage complex or serious difficulties alone. The pathway helps you share responsibility and escalate appropriately. Following a disclosure of self-harm, consider writing up a simple safety plan with a young person. This can involve agreeing with them, identifying things such as what helps when they're experiencing strong and distressing feelings, who they can talk to, and what support is available to them. Where appropriate, we should try to involve parents and carers and consider the young person's wider support network in what can help keep them safe. It's also important to recognise that young people might continue to use self-harm after our conversation to help manage their difficult feelings. So we shouldn't be telling them to stop this right away, or asking them to make promises to us or other people that they will stop. It's more important to help them get the support they need to help them manage how they are feeling. There are self-harm pathways around these guides that show how systems link up and how this approach is joined up with other services. So we have the Multi-Agency Self-Harm Practice Guide, the Older Adult Self-Harm Guide, the Parents and Carers Guide, and a Self-Harmers Guide, and Crisis Support Resources. The Multi-Agency Self-Harm Practice Guide includes pathways for self-harm, suicidal thoughts, and a multi-agency response. And this all aligns with the Pan-Lancashire safeguarding procedures. The key message in all of this is that safeguarding is a shared responsibility and no one carries these concerns alone. Young people also need to know support exists beyond the education setting, and so signposting them to support can be helpful. You can find out about more resources at the Lancashire and South Cumbria ICB website, and there are some resources on a Padlet prepared for Mental Health Awareness Week. It's also important to support the network and community around young people, so remember that there is support for parents and carers, and support for all professionals via the Papyrus Debriefing Service. Training is also available for professionals at all levels. So we have the Orange Button Suicide Prevention Training, Staying Safe from Suicide Resources on the MindEd Hub, and the Zero Suicide Alliance Awareness Training courses. And remember to connect to your mental health support team if you're linked to one for further support. The key message from this webinar is that self-harm is a coping strategy, it's not a behaviour to punish. Listening calmly is one of the most protective things you can do. And you do not need to be an expert, just be present and consistent. Use the pathway to guide your decisions and always follow safeguarding procedures. Most importantly, don't hold on to concerns on your own. Supporting self-harm can be emotionally challenging. It's important to share concerns, seek support from colleagues, and look after your own well-being. Use the practice guide, it's designed to support you. Look at the training options or contact your local authority for a list of providers locally. Connect to the suicide prevention networks that can listen and support the system, And finally, thank you for the role you play in supporting young people. You can download the pack to deliver to your team with a script and Q&A sheet from the ICB YouTube channel. And please let us know how these practice guides are working for you. Thank you.